Okay,
All
so
right,
everyone can
everybody
click got it.
on got it.
Got it.
All right, thumbs up if you were able to do that. Yep. All right, amazing. All right, so Becky and Haley, whenever you're ready, feel free to get started.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for being here and for being part of our Speakers Bureau. So basically, as Jack and Joanna were saying, feel free to write into the chat any questions that you have. Haley will communicate them to me. I wanted you to see my face at the beginning, but then in 1 second, I'm going to turn the camera. So it's as if you're walking through the exhibition with me. But basically, this exhibition, as Jack was saying, it's telling the history of Jewish life before, during, and immediately after the Holocaust, primarily using personal stories. And for us, it was really important to talk about the people and about these personal stories through their objects as we share this history, so that it's not just the statistic, but that our visitors, young and old alike, could really connect to who the people really were and are. And so also, as Jack was saying, the exhibition is really expansive. There's over 750 objects, over 350 photographs, over 150 testimonies, and then additional historical footage, maps, timelines, and more. So you could spend at least 6 hours in there, probably longer. This is going to be a highlight tour. So we won't necessarily get to see everything, but I'll give you an overview on what each room is. And then I'll show you about 1 or 2 objects within every room. But of course, because it's only a highlight tour, this tour won't necessarily touch on every single experience or every single object or type of object that we have in the exhibition, because otherwise we would be here all night. However, it will show you a great deal and really an overview of how we approached our new core exhibition. So I'm going to turn my camera now, and you should be able to see.
Becky, I'm just going to spotlight you so that everyone can see you better. Is that okay?
Perfect.
Okay, great.
And you'll also see, we're open to the public today. So there are people going through the exhibition live as well. But so you can see right here's the entrance to the exhibition as you're coming through from the lobby. And as you enter, we'll walk through this hallway here where there are 32 photos. They're all circa 1930, celebrating the diaspora, which is the Greek word for dispersion. And there's photographs from over 25 different countries within this hallway. You'll also be able to hear in the background that there's various different music playing, including children singing the Hatikva and various different prayers, Ein Eloheinu, and more. And so part of the way that we told personal stories in this exhibition is that there's certain people that you could actually follow throughout, and that you'll see their objects and their story in multiple places in the exhibition. So 2 of those we will follow today. The first is this young girl who I'm showing you right here. This is Yocheved Farber. This was her when she was about 2 years old. And she was on vacation with her family in a spa town right outside of Vilna. So we'll hear more about her story later on in the exhibition. Then, as I'm continuing on, you're able to see various different photographs along with historical footage and videos, all circa 1930, really celebrating the world that was. And the second person that we're going to follow is someone that was a member of our Speakers Bureau that I believe many of you knew, which was Max Lerner. This is actually Max when he was about 3 years old. You could see it's a picture of him and his parents when they were on vacation in Italy in 1927. So he was from Vienna, but this is him on vacation in Italy. So we're going to follow both Yocheved and Max's story throughout the exhibition. At the end of this hallway, you'll see the words, "Many of these Jews were murdered by April 1943. And the reason we focused in on April of 1943 is because this first room is actually a case study on the month of April of 1943. So you'll see as you enter in, there's photographs on the ceiling of different events that were occurring in the month of April 1943. And then along the walls, there's text and cases relating to a number of different events that all happened within that 1 month. And it's really this room meant to be a symphony, a cacophony of all of these different events, from the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, where you see this talit that Schlesinger recovered from the ruins of the Warsaw Ghetto after the uprising, from mass shootings of Jews at Ponar. And these are objects that were recovered from Ponar, to in April of 1943, crematoria 2 and 3 were newly established at Auschwitz. So this is a crematoria brick from Auschwitz, along with a Moses pendant that was recovered there. It was also Passover around the world in April of 1943. So these are 2 Haggadot and a prayer that were used during Passover in April 1943. We touch on the We Will Never Die Memorial Pageant, which was in New York City in April of 1943. It was actually in Washington, D.C., and this is a program from it, along with the Bermuda Conference. And this is a program from the Bermuda Conference, along with a number of different other events that were all occurring within this 1 month of April 1943. And the reason that we started in April 1943 was because we wanted to give our visitors a sense of when we go back in time and talk about the history of Judaism and the rise of the Nazis and of the Holocaust, we wanted them to get a sense of what it was all building up to. So they knew from the beginning what it was building up to, so that then they can go back in time and learn about it. And it's really a case study on just this 1 month where a range of different events were all happening, from resistance to mass shootings, to crematoria 2 and 3, to Passover, to lobbyists coming together and not creating a plan in the Bermuda Conference, really making up in many ways the what of the Holocaust. So if that is the what, this next room is the who. And this is our room on Jews and Judaism. And you'll notice as you walk in, the ceiling is actually meant to evoke different historic wooden synagogues of Eastern Europe. And you'll see that it has this magenta coloring to the room, along with photographs along the ceiling, and then casework at eye level. And this room, it's really a celebratory space. And it's celebrating the vibrancy and diversity of pre-war Jewish life. So we begin here with looking at Jewish ritual objects from the birth cycle, starting with this beautiful illuminated amulet from Yanina, Greece, moving on to various different circumcision objects, including a circumcision knife, these bar and bat mitzvah objects. And I should say, the objects in this room come from over 25 different countries. So you can see that they're from all over the world. So this case right here is actually one of my favorites in the entire exhibition. It starts off with these beautiful mikvah clogs, which Rachel Rabbit Sutton Mansoura wore to the mikvah, the ritual bath, right before her wedding in Aleppo, Syria in the 1890s. Then right here is this ketubah, this marriage contract. I'll step back a little so you can see the full thing. And then I'll zoom in on it a little. And it's from Iran in 1898. This ketubah, which is from Morocco in 1910. You can see how beautiful it is. This ketubah addendum, which is from Yemen in 1915. And then this get, a divorce certificate from New York City in 1932. So within this one case, you can see objects related to marriage from Syria, from Morocco, from Iran, from Yemen, from New York. And what I think is so beautiful about it is it shows that, especially when you're looking at the marriage contracts next to each other, you can see so many similarities between them. both in terms of the overall form and many of the prayers that are on them, but that also you can see how unique they were to their own communities. I mean, these flowers right here are so distinctly in the Moroccan tradition of art at the time, same as here, these triangles on this Ketubah addendum from Yemen. And so you're able to see that while these traditions existed all over the world, they were also morphed and molded to their own unique Jewish communities, which is really something that we wanted to show to our visitors throughout this room. You'll also notice, of course, that there's video testimonies playing throughout so that our visitors could hear from survivors and witnesses and liberators themselves. And there's video testimony in just about every single room in the exhibition. Here's where we talk about the cycle of Jewish holiday life. And again, there's Judaica, Jewish ritual objects from all over the world. If you turn around, the centerpiece of the room is the Steinberger Sukkah, which many of you might recognize from the Old Core exhibition. But you'll see it's displayed in a different way here. And for those of you who might not be familiar with the Sukkah, these are two wall hangings that were created by Aryeh Steinberger, who is a cantor, a ritual slaughterer, an artist, a teacher, and a scribe. And he made them in the 1920s and 1930s in Budapest, Hungary. And they would hang along the walls of the sukkah for the holiday of Sukkot. They include prayers to be sung on Sukkot. You know, the Birkat Hamazon is included on it, along with artwork such as scenes from the land of Israel, biblical scenes, and scenes from Hungary. It's extremely, extremely detailed. There's so much to see on it. You could spend hours in front of it staring, but I'll show you two quick things. This right here, you're able to see Moses receiving the 10 Commandments. And then right here, so his name was Aryeh, which translates to lion in Hebrew. So he signed it with a lion. So Aryeh Steinberger actually died in 1942. And he was from Hungary, and so the Holocaust had not fully come yet to Hungary at that time. Closer to 1944, his family, after he had died, they buried these in the basement of the Great Synagogue in Budapest, and surviving family members were able to recover it after the war, eventually bringing it with them to the United States. And so along in this room, we also talk about Jewish learning, as well as the different Jewish languages and Jewish culture, and the different types and parts and streams of Judaism. Our next room is on historical anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. And you'll immediately see as you enter the room that there's a timeline dating back to 1096, showing the 2,000 plus year history of anti-Semitism. And you'll notice that there's such a different shift in the tone as you're in this room in terms of the design of it. Now, if there was to be a thesis of this room, it's that anti-Semitism existed long before the Holocaust, far outside of Germany. And a key object that shows that is this right here. This letter was signed by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella in December of 1492. And you're able to see their signatures here on the letter. In March of 1492, they had issued the Alhambra Decree, the expulsion of the Jews of Spain. And Jews were forced to either convert to Christianity or flee the country. By the end of the year, about 175,000 Jews had fled Spain. Now, at the end of the year, in December of 1492, the king and queen were sending letters to various different leaders. This one went to a man named Rodrigo de Mercado, who was the governor of a commercial area called Medina del Campo, telling him what to do with any Jews that were still living in his area and any Jewish property that was remaining. And to see a letter that's this old, dating all the way back to 1492, especially for our young visitors, it really drives the point home of how historic and widespread anti-Semitism really is.
Hello?
So throughout the room, you're able to see along the walls a number of different themes of anti-Semitism that existed in a number of different countries. So it's where we talk about pogroms, the protocols of the Elders of Zion, blood libels, expulsions. Whereas in the center three pillars, we focus in on French anti-Semitism, German anti-Semitism, and American anti-Semitism. Here's a large map where we point out sites of major pogroms. And our next room is on modern Jewish responses from 1881 to 1933. And one of the first responses that we talk about is the mass immigration of Jews. And you'll notice it's a very clear through line from the pogroms to the mass immigration of Jews in this next room. And so these are all objects that Jews brought with them when they immigrated to the United States. Between 1881 and 1924, about 2.5 million Jews came to the US. In this room, we also talk about responses such as joining different political movements. So the Jewish socialism and then the Zionist movement, along with talking about Jewish life in Weimar Germany and about their assimilation and their role in Weimar Germany, both in terms of their role in politics and business, as well as culture. And so you can see this violin that was played by a Jew in Weimar Germany, along with talking about the Weimar Bauhaus. And then we also discuss World War I and Jewish life and Jewish soldiers in World War I, especially Jews who fought for Germany and were awarded Iron Crosses. You can see these here are all Iron Crosses, along with other medals that Jews received for fighting for their own individual nations during World War I. And because it's Hanukkah right now, I have to show you this, which this is a menorah that the Heidelberger family used during World War I, because due to the scarcity of supplies, they were able to get oil, but not candles. And you'll notice that it has two rows so that two families could use it at the same time with one shared shamash.
Mm.
And then the family actually came to the United States in 1937, and they brought this special menorah, which they had used during World War I, with them. So as we move into our next room, this is our room on Nazi Germany. And one of the first objects that you see when you walk in is Heinrich Himmler's personal annotated copy of Mein Kampf. You might notice, so I'll show you this first, that there's videos that's playing on the other side of this case of Nazi rallies, of book burnings, of Hitler Youth. And so that's what you'll see a little bit in the reflection of this case. But so this is both volume 1 and volume 2. And Himmler, he read this back in 1926 and 1927. So it's really before he was the Himmler that we now all know so well today. And he read it very slowly. We know this because at the end of every chapter, he wrote the location and date of where he was when he read it. He made a number of different annotations throughout, and I'm trying to get as close as I can with my phone. You should be able to see, some of the places where he underlined and that he did write these different notes. I hope you can see it. But one of the things that he had noted was Hitler had written in Mein Kampf that he believed that if Germany gassed between 12,000 and 15,000 Jews in World War I, then he believes that Germany would have won the war. Himmler, back in 1926, underlined that. And there's so much foreshadowing to the fact that he underlined that back in 1926. Now, he gave the same copy of Mein Kampf to his father to read, and his father also marked it up, but they had very different handwriting. And so you're able to tell really clearly what Himmler Jr. versus Himmler Sr. wrote. His father, at the very end, wrote a note that said, "Read to the end with fervid interest and sincere admiration of this man." So of course, he was praising Hitler and Mein Kampf, but in many ways, he was really giving his son his blessing to become the Himmler that we now know today. And so you'll see as we move throughout the room, in the center three areas is where we talk about the creation and rise of the Nazi Party, the different Nazi organizations, about book burnings, propaganda, the 1936 Olympics, whereas along the back walls is where we talk about what the rise of the Nazi Party meant for everyone else. So you can see here, these racial determination tables, which was a field kit that was made by two different Nazi scientists determining who was part of the master race in their eyes. And so here's where we really discuss the initial persecution of Jews, of Jehovah's Witnesses, of Black Germans, of Roma and Sinti, of gay men, and of the disabled. And you'll see, of course, as well, that there's testimony playing of Jews telling their stories. The room culminates in 1938, which the Nazis deemed the fateful year. And it begins with the Anschluss, moves on to the Poland action, and then is where we talk about Kristallnacht. So you can see these are all objects related to Kristallnacht. And then this here is the Torah scroll that Dr. Seligman Bear Bamberger recovered on the night of Kristallnacht from the Bornplatz Synagogue in Hamburg that his family brought with them when they came to the United States in 1940. So the Bambergers were extremely lucky that they were able to get out in 1940. And this is our room on flight and Jewish responses. And for all of the curators, what was really of the utmost importance to us in this room is that, and I'm sure you've all had this experience, is that so many people ask, why didn't the Jews just leave? Why didn't they get out? And we really wanted to stress how hard and difficult and in many ways impossible it was for so many Jews to leave. And so in this room over here is where we talk about a number of these different efforts, including various different affidavits of support and letters that people wrote to strangers trying to ask for their help to get out. Here's the picture of a long line of Jews who are lined up outside the American consulate in Marseille, France, all trying to apply for visas. We also start off by showing various different quotes, including a quote by a man named Eric Livingston, who was from Germany, who said, "Hitler would have let me go at that time. It was America who didn't let me in." Now, we do also talk about different success stories of Jews who were able to get out, including those who fled to Shanghai, those who went to Sosua in the Dominican Republic, along with Jews that went on kinder transports. This right here is a piano that a young girl named Hedy Beres Soroka had with her in Vienna, where she was from. After the Anschluss and Kristallnacht, her family decided that they really needed to leave Vienna. And before even finding out if they were going to be able to leave, they didn't have visas yet. They sent certain family valuables to their relatives that were living in the United States. And Hetty had grown up, loved playing the piano. It was so important to her. And her parents shipped her Lauberger and Gloss upright piano to relatives that were living in the United States. And if you look closely here, and I'm hopeful that you can see it, you should be able to just faintly see it, that there's these 3 little holes on the piano.
Mhm.
That's where the sconces were, which for pianos were used to hold the light on the piano. During transit, the Nazis stole the sconces because they were silver or brass, and the holes from which still remain. So Hetty, when she was 11 years old, her visa came first. And so they sent her all alone at 11. This right here is actually her passport from when she left. You can see that's her. This is a postcard that Hetty wrote to her parents from Paris, telling them that she was okay. So, you could very faintly see where she says, Liebe Eltern. Hetty eventually got to the United States. Eventually, soon after, so did her parents, and so did her piano. And she kept it in her same Brooklyn apartment for close to 75 years until she died last year in 2021, and her children donated the piano to us. So the piano is on view for the very first time. We just acquired it last year, and we're actively collecting and adding objects to our collection. And so I told you all that one of the stories that will follow is that of Max Lerner. And so Max and his family were also from Vienna. And after the Anschluss, they also decided that they needed to leave. And so they left in 1938. It took them 3 years to eventually get to the United States. They traveled via France, Spain, and Portugal, eventually getting here in April of 1941. So these are all objects related to Max's immigration journey. This right here is a ship ticket that he and his father had used. We also have the ship ticket that his mom and sister used from Lisbon to New York to get here in April of 1941. So we'll continue his story more on the next floor. This next room is on Nazi expansion. And so we start off with the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, the German invasion of Poland, and immediately, as we're talking about these invasions, and the room goes on to talk about invasions of Northern, Western, and Southern Europe, we talk about the effects that it has on Jews and of people living in these different areas. And so, of course, one of the key ways was Jews being forced to wear yellow stars. And here in this centerpiece of the room are 36, so a very intentional number of double high yellow stars that are from Hungary and Belgium and Bulgaria, Croatia, France, the Netherlands, Germany. And you can see the wide variation of yellow stars, whether it has Jew in French or German or Dutch. Also when there was the J instead. And so you're able to see all of these different yellow stars, most of which were worn by the people that donated them to us. We also touch on flight to the Soviet Union of so many Polish Jews who, after the invasion of Poland, fled to the Soviet Union. Here's where we talk about the invasions of Northern, Western, and Southern Europe, about Jewish life under German occupation, along with Operation T4, the Nazis' persecution of people with disabilities. So as we go up now to the second floor, you're able to see there's quotes on the wall. I can take a quick question as we go up the escalator if there are any in the chat. Otherwise, we will continue and there can be questions at the end.
So Becky,
So-
I don't see any questions in the chat. Did you want to take one verbally or just continue on?
I think I will continue, and then if there's questions at the end, we can ask them then, will probably be best.
Okay, sounds good.
So now we're up here on the second floor. So the second floor begins, this is our room on ghettos. And you'll see here this photograph of Jews building the Warsaw Ghetto Wall. Here are different ghetto announcements. So we talk about life in the ghettos. There's various historical footage along with testimonies. And in here, instead of having a different section on the Warsaw Ghetto, the Krakow Ghetto, on Vilna and Theresienstadt, instead we spoke about different themes and experiences that were present in each of these different ghettos. And so we're gonna look right here at this little Torah scroll. So if you remember this little girl from the beginning, Yocheved Farber, who I told you that we were gonna see her story throughout. So that's a photograph of her that we had seen at the beginning. And she was about 2 years old on vacation with her family in a spa town outside of Vilna. And so this right here is a miniature Sefer Torah that had belonged to her. And when her family was forced into the Vilna ghetto in 1941, they were deeply committed to continuing to practice their Judaism. For Yocheved, who at that time was 4 years old, her way was by bringing this miniature toy Torah, really the kind that children play with, Simchat Torah. And I've always felt so connected, to her story, but also to this object because it's so similar to one that I had when I was a young girl and that I had used to play with. And in the Vilna ghetto, her father and her mother took a number of steps in order for them to continue practicing their Judaism. Her father was able to procure work outside of the ghetto, and he used this pant leg, which is in a nearby case, that he would stuff this bag up his pants so that he could bring food back into the ghetto for his family. Now, because he was involved with a number of different partisan and resistance efforts, that he was contacted in 1942 by a woman who offered to smuggle Yocheved out of the Vilna ghetto. The family really deliberated this, but they decided they wanted to keep the family together. In 1943, they were sent to the HKP 562 labor camp, which was also in Vilna. And on March 27th, 1944, Yocheved was rounded up in a kinder action, a children's roundup, and brought to a nearby site and murdered. Her father found out later that evening, and he wrote in his diary that night, "On this day, the children of Israel of the HKP camp were taken from us. There are some holy things we simply cannot understand." Soon after him and his wife escaped, they went into hiding in a bunker in Vilna. They brought their daughter's miniature Torah. They brought this child's potholder loom that she had been working on. And they also brought this pot that they added this inscription in Hebrew to it after the war. And it translates to, "In this pot, kosher food was cooked for a young girl in the Vilna ghetto who was taken to be annihilated." And so Yocheved was murdered in what many people refer to as the Holocaust by bullets or the genocide by mass shooting. And that's what we touch on in this next room, which is titled "The Final Solution in the German-Conquered Soviet Union." So one of the first objects that you'll see in this room are these two dreidels, which were recovered from one of the killing sites in Ukraine. And I thought it was very, special to look at these, especially given that it's Hanukkah right now. I'm trying to get as close as I can to them through the case so that you can see really how tiny that they are. So these dreidels are an example of an object that we actually don't know who they belong to. So much of this exhibition, we're so focused on the personal story of the people behind the objects. And for here, we don't know. We just know that they were recovered from a killing site in Ukraine. And we can ask so many questions about who had these with them there. Was it someone who knew what was about to happen to them, that took them as a final act of defiance and held the dreidels in their pocket? Or were it two children who were simply playing dreidel, not knowing what was about to happen? And I think the fact that we can ask so many of these questions, it really shows how these dreidels stand in for the massive amounts of stories that we don't have the privilege of knowing, because there are stories of Jews who were murdered in the Holocaust. And that while we celebrate and tell the stories that we do know, there's so many more that we don't. And so throughout this room, we talk about the killing fields and of these mass shootings throughout the Soviet Union. You can see here, these are all bullets and cartridges and ammunition belts that were recovered from sites throughout the Soviet Union. Here's actually an interactive map that when you're here, I encourage you to use it. We are able to look up the different killing sites and watch testimonies and learn about each of the different sites. This next room is on roundups, deportations, and factories of murder. And so we're going to move through. It starts off by talking about Operation Reinhardt and then the Wannsee Conference. And then we move through to talking about roundups and deportation, including final notes that were sent, historical footage from a number of these different roundups. And then in this hallway, there's photographs from roundups and deportations, along with drawings depicting them, as well as some objects that were left behind when Jews were deported, along with objects that Jews took with them when they were deported. And here's where we talk about the 6 different death camps. You'll see that there's testimony, along with a number of different objects that were recovered, many of them from Canada Warehouse at Auschwitz-Birkenau. This is a crematoria brick from Birkenau. And then we'll stop and look briefly at these tefillin. They belong to a man named Chaim Prevosnik, and he was gifted them for his bar mitzvah in 1924 in Poland. When he was gifted them, the rabbi told him, "Take the tefillin with you everywhere you go." And Chaim really took that to heart. And in 1943, when he was deported to Sobibor, he brought these tefillin with him, and he buried them in a tin box right outside his barrack. In October of 1943, right before the Sobibor uprising, he dug them up and brought them with him when he fought in the uprising and escaped into the woods. And for those of you who know a lot about the Sobibor uprising in 1943, many of the Jews who fought in it were then later caught and murdered. It's said that less than 50 Jews survived after the Sobibor uprising. Chaim was one of them. This is actually him right here in this group portrait of Jews who fought in the Sobibor uprising. And he continued to say after the war, "Because I had the tefillin, that's why I survived." Our next room is on hiding, escape, and resistance. And we start off by talking about a number of different types of hiding, whether physically going into hiding or hiding in plain sight and using fake IDs. We also, of course, talk about the people that helped Jews go into hiding, touching as well on Righteous Among the Nations. We focus in specifically on children who went into hiding, many of them changing their religions and their identities, going into convents and orphanages. When we talk about escape, there's this doll, which I don't have time to tell the full story, but to explain to the little girl what was happening, Ava Bass, her parents made the doll her very own passport. And that's how they explained to her that they needed to escape over the Italian Alps into safety. These are a pair of skis that Helen Ehrlich used to ski from Norway into Sweden. Then here is where we talk about resistance. And this right here is actually Tuvia Bielski's shirt that he wore as part of the Bielski Brigade in the Belarusian forests. Our next room is on concentration camps and labor camps. And you'll notice when you walk in that the room is very white and light. Part of the design intention for that was that we wanted to remind our visitors that these atrocities occurred in broad daylight. So we're going to take a look at this bowl right here. This bull belonged to the Berbia family, who were from Tripoli, Libya. During the Holocaust, they were sent first to a camp in Libya, then to a camp in Italy, and eventually to Bergen-Belsen in Germany, where there's a separate part of the camp specifically for Libyan Jews. They brought this bull with them, using it for food preparation and hand washing. And while they were in Bergen-Belsen, their third son was actually born. And they circumcised him in this bull that they had brought all the way from Libya. The whole family was able to survive. And I can't get closer, but there's a photo of the family right after the war in Israel. Oh, this, you should be able to see it, in 1945 afterwards, and they had emigrated to Israel. Throughout this room, you're able to see a number of different uniforms that were worn in the different concentration camps, along with photos of child prisoners at Auschwitz. These are all objects speaking about starvation in the camps. Here we talk a great deal about spiritual resistance. And one of my favorite objects is this Haggadah that a woman named Dina Kraus hand wrote from memory so that she could have a secret Seder in the Unterlüss labor camp. You'll see here Louis Bannett's trumpet that he had played as part of the Auschwitz-Birkenau orchestra that he was forced to. These are a number of different Alfred Kantor's drawings. And then here is a large map of a number of different major and minor concentration camps and labor camps. Our next room is on what the world knew and did. And it starts off by showing Gerhard Riegner's personal copy of the famous Riegner telegram that he had sent to Rabbi Stephen Wise, that the US State Department has stopped from being delivered at first, but that was one of the key ways that people in the United States found out about what was happening. Here are a number of different headlines, all from the summer of 1942. Germans murder 700,000 Jews in Poland. Massacre of Jews over 1 million since the war began. Nazis kill million Jews, says survey. From the New York Times, the LA Times, the London Times. But you'll notice we always included the page number. Page 12, page 10, page 16. Yeah, it wasn't, the news was getting out, but it wasn't front page headline news. We do speak about a number of the different groups that came together, different lobbying groups, the Emergency Committee to Save the Jews of Europe, that great photo of the Rabbis' March on Washington, and about various different global rescue efforts. We move on to speaking about the War Refugee Board, and Fort Ontario, the refugee camp that was set up in Oswego, New York. And we also talk about the Ritchie boys. And so you'll remember that we left off Max Lerner's story in April 1941, where after 3 years, his family got to New York. About a year later, on his 18th birthday, Max enlisted in the US Army, desperate to aid the war effort. And due to his fluency in 3 languages, he was sent to Camp Ritchie in Maryland, where he trained with many other Jewish refugees, many of them also from either Germany or Austria, to work in intelligence and in various different interrogation efforts. And so in 1944, he returned to the continent that he had spent 3 years trying to get out of, but this time as an American citizen, an American soldier. On the left is his US Army uniform, and on the right is a Nazi uniform that he had worn in an undercover mission. This is a Nazi cap that he had recovered, and a sword and a truncheon. And he had served in the Office of Strategic Services and the Counterintelligence Corps, like gathering different intelligence information. He stayed there through 1946, continuing to work on interrogations. And when he returned to New York, he brought this cigar box of mementos. It includes different Nazi loot and American memorabilia. And when you're in the exhibition, you could see it up close, but on top are his 2 US Army dog tags. And when you look really close, you'll see that they have the H for Hebrew, denoting his Jewish faith. That, of course, in the US Army was a choice. And when I was speaking with him about it about a year ago, he told me that no matter what, even when he was going undercover, he wanted the H there to always be true to who he was. This room, of course, also touches on what more the world could have done. And in our final room, it's on death marches, liberation, and beginning again. And so we start off with the death marches and with a number of different objects related to death marches, including this annotated map by Abraham Meltzer. We move on to talking about liberation and the end of the war, along with the liberators themselves. This dresser actually belonged to a liberator, where in a secret compartment, he had stored the objects related to his experience as a liberator that his family only discovered after the war, ready to tell the story that he didn't want to speak about. We then talk about displaced persons camps and kibbutz Buchenwald. You can see all of these different objects related to rebuilding, to mourning and commemoration. And throughout this room, we really wanted to stress about how difficult life was in the immediate aftermath. And here, these are all different letters and telegrams that Jews had sent, trying to find out who, if anyone from their family, had survived. Here's where we talk about the rebuilding of Jewish life, the global confrontation with atrocities. So you can see this picture from the 1945 Lest We Forget exhibition in June of 1945, where Americans were looking at all of these different atrocity photographs. We move on to talking about the Nuremberg trials, about immigration to the United States and to pre-state Israel, along with then the birth of Israel, the Displaced Persons Act of 1948, the UN Genocide Convention. And then at the very end, we bring it back to survivors and liberators themselves. We really didn't want there to be a simple end to this exhibition because there isn't one simple end and message. Instead, we wanted to turn it back to the survivors themselves, to give them the last word so that they could share their experiences, talking about survivors' guilt or what it meant to them to survive, and their messages for our visitors of what it means to be living in a time of rising anti-Semitism and racism and xenophobia and hate speech. And so it's a rather long video where our visitors can sit, at this bench right here and listen to a number of different survivors and liberators' messages as the last word. And then the final exit hallway has 30 photos. 20 of them are in black and white of those who were murdered in the Holocaust, and 10 are in color. Because we were following Max, you're able to see this photo of him from 2021 with his wife, Lenore. But so 10 of the photographs are in color. And so while we're celebrating survivors and those who survived and went on to rebuild their lives, we're also remembering that so many Jews were murdered in the Holocaust. And so we include in the caption on every single photograph what happened to each person, whether they had survived or were murdered in the Holocaust. And so that's the end of the exhibition. I know we're a tiny bit over time, but you can really spend hours and hours and hours in there. And so you'll see right here at the end, when you listen to a witness, you become a witness, the quote from Ali Wiesel. And then you'll recognize where we are, right in your locks. And I'd be happy to take a few questions for any of you that are able to stay on that have questions.
Thank you so much, Becky and Haley. That was really so fantastic. And I know you work so hard on that with your team. And thank you for your dedication to your work. We would love to take your questions, as Becky said. So I'd recommend maybe folks raising their hand and we can individually call on you and take each question one at a time. So who would like to ask a question or even make a comment? So Becky, maybe we could just start off with, can you tell us how many objects are in the exhibition?
Yeah, so there are over 750 objects in the exhibition, and 99% of those come from our collection. But in addition to that, there's, over 350 photographs and over 150 testimonies.
Wow.
That's amazing. Toby, did you have a question?
No, I have a statement. You did a great job, really. I'm trying to see if I can come and do a job like you. I don't think so. You emphasize where it's important, but it's a huge job. It's a huge job. To me, it looks sounds and it's a big undertaking to explain to people they should see it the way you see it. You put me in a position to understand it very well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I will try, but I'm not sure I'm able. It's also the emotional effect. It touched me. At every picture that I looked, I had a connection here, a connection there. And we are getting older and it's getting harder.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. You did a great job. You remind me of my grandchildren, that they taking over. Continue.
Thank you so much.
I'm very proud to be able to have seen your job and the museum putting together such a great exhibit. People will really appreciate it. And I'm going to come. I'm not done. I'm not done.
Let me know when you come. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Toby. Mr. Forley, did you have a question or a comment?
I just wanted to ask, is this going to be shown to different schools or different organizations
Yes. So
this way, can I?
for them to see?
there's so many schools have already been coming through. And so we're online with a lot of the members of our education department who are leading tours along with working with our gallery educators, but hundreds and hundreds of students have already come through, as well as, lots of different older visitors as well.
I just want to say thank you so much. My name is Rina. It was amazing to listen to you how well you did it, how deep is your knowledge. Thank you so very, very much.
In such a short time.
Thank you.
I
Thank
also
you.
want to, hi, Becca, this is Gabriella. I also want to add my admiration. It was really beautifully done. But I'm wondering, the students, when they come, I know that there's even more time perhaps for them. It's an hour and a half, they can have up to an hour
Yes.
and a half. But I don't think that it's done in the same manner. I don't know whether they will continue to follow, like the way we did, the two people, Yocheved and Max and so on. I don't think it's
Yeah.
done.
They have a different structured tour that was created by our education department that's specifically targeted for students.
for
So
students.
yes,
Okay. Yeah, all right. No, the reason is because I am one of the educators and I have not
Got
done it yet. And I really want to, I came already, I had seen the exhibit, and this time I saw it from a totally different through different lenses, the way you presented it, which was really fabulous. But I say to myself, wow, if I needed to do this for the students, I really don't think I could do it. Just as Toby said. But I think that the way I understand it, it's similar in many ways to the way we had it. The court exhibit, what we had earlier, it's not the same, but it's kind of similar. And I'm not sure that they start, I don't know whether they do start with life before the war and everything. But I think that the way you were talking about April 1943 and all of that, I'm not sure that that's.
yeah. So there's a number of similarities to our original core exhibition, but of course, the fact that the April of 1943 start is definitely different, along with many, many, many of the objects are on view for the very first time. So it's different stories, different objects that we're telling. And then there were a number of different things that, our old core exhibition opened in 1997. This is now 2022. And
Right.
so with new scholarship and more information, we were able to stress various different aspects of history. I mean, one of the most in specific is highlighting more of the flight to the Soviet Union, and then the final solution in the Soviet Union, which there's just been so much more scholarship on in recent years. We also have a lot more Sephardic objects and voices throughout the exhibition. And so there's, of course, similarities in how the way we tell the history, just because it's so mission driven for the museum, but a number of changes out well. And it's, completely new design and text and object curation and everything.
Well, thank you.
Thank
course.
you.
Thank you.
I see we have a question from Mr. Spielman, and then we'll move to Susan Kalev. So Mr. Spielman, do you want to start first?
Not a question. What I want to do is confirm. We did see the exhibit. And many times we didn't know what we were looking at. So it was explained to us, each item, what it represents. And it's much easier to understand
Sure.
actually what happened.
Yeah, we got more out of it today because she highlighted everything that was really important. So we enjoyed it even more today than when we saw the exhibit in person. It was wonderful. She did an amazing job. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Wonderful. I see Susan and then Maritza, if you'd like to go next. So Susan, go ahead.
Yes, this was remarkable. My first question is, how long did it take you to put this together so remarkably well? And my second question is, my granddaughter, 12 years old, 13 years old, this would not all be appropriate for that age. And then they would go to the children's exhibit, or would someone be a guide to point out things that could be absorbed and understood by a 12-year-old?
So to answer your first question, this took, it was a large team and it took a number of years for us to put it together. And for your second question, and for our colleagues from education, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm from the collections and exhibitions, curatorial team. So I'm not working with students myself, but from my understanding, it's that, if a 12-year-old was to go through, that they would be shown specific things that are age appropriate for a 12-year-old on a guided tour. But then, as you said, we are currently working on our first ever children's exhibition. And so then that would really be somewhere where they would thrive. And that's totally targeted towards their age range. But, Paul or Joanna, if you want to jump in on that.
When would that be open?
Sure. I mean, we try to we encourage students from 7th grade and up to come. 6th grade is sort of a judgment call, but even with the 6th graders, we'd be a little bit more cautious about what we would show, and perhaps edit it more. But we have a particular script that's designed for students. And the script includes time for the students to reflect on what they've seen and to interact with the gallery educator. So it's a little bit different than what Becky was able to present, but so it probably presents fewer things, but gives them a little bit more time to process.
Thank you. So Maritza, I think you had a comment or a question. Would you like to go next?
Yes, first of all, thank you for the monumental job that you did. It was really amazing. I have a practical question. When students come in their class, do they mostly arrange for a survivor speaker? Is that recommended to them? Is that usually arranged? Because I think it would be a very dramatic point after they see an exhibit. And the question in connection with that is, we are all survivors, of course, are pretty old and worried about COVID and being out in. So is Zoom available, and is that okay for these students to have speakers on Zoom, or should we try to be in person?
Becky,
I'm going to
do you
hand this.
you want me to take
I'll
that
hand
one?
this to our education colleagues. Yeah.
So Maritza, thank you for that question. The first thing is that when schools book visits through the museum, we always have a question that says, would you like for your students to hear Holocaust survivor testimony? And I would say a very good majority of them do, which is absolutely fantastic. We really base our policy of Zoom or in person based on what speakers are most comfortable with. I would say a good 80% of all testimonies have been taking place on Zoom, and I think that will continue for quite a long time. So we always communicate with schools that we will probably do Zoom. If somebody wants to come in person, they're always welcome to, but it's based off of what your comfort level is, and your safety is what's most important, both your physical safety and your emotional safety as you're telling the story. So I just want to reassure you that we very much advocate for Zoom, and what is most comfortable for you is what we will center at all times. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you, Joan.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Spielman, did you have your hand up again?
I have a suggestion. Every time a group of people come and to view the exhibit, there should be someone to explain the highlights of the most important things, what they should look at and study it and read into it. We saw it. We didn't really understand what we were looking at. By today's Zoom, we learned much more
Of course.
in the hour that we were listening to. Each item that it was explained to us. It's like day and night,
Because they highlighted the important things, that's all.
right?
And when you're viewing it, you're not sure what to spend the time and what to concentrate on. So
Yeah,
Thank you for doing that.
of course. Yeah. And we do offer, of course, guided tours, both for students and non-students. And so for various visitors, we also do have an audio guide component that a number of our visitors have been using, which is a way to have a bit of a guided tour, but self-guided throughout the exhibition. But no, I think it is very different to experience the exhibition from a tour or from audio guide versus seeing it oneself. And
Right.
this exhibition, there's so much. And so it could feel really overwhelming of how much there is to see and to not know what to focus on. And in parts, we wanted that in the sense of visitors coming back over and over again. I mean, there's this one member that I know comes every single Friday because he just wants to keep seeing more of the exhibition. And so it is a really good point, but I do think that there's so many different opportunities for people to learn a lot and to study different things every single time that they come to the museum, to the exhibition.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. Mr. Forley, you had your hand raised.
Yes, I just wondered, such a wonderful explanation, whether was this locally only, or did it go statewide, through the country?
So
Or-
this is our core collection exhibition. And so it's, at the Museum of Jewish Heritage here in New York in Battery Park City. I don't know if you're asking about in the sense of if the objects are all local or if it's.
Whether your presentation was presented outside of New York
By Zoom.
by Zoom, via Zoom.
Oh, yeah, I know a number of you are from outside of New York. I know Anita's from Colorado. I don't know if anyone's from farther than that, but yeah, we've gone outside of New York on today's Zoom for sure.
It was
And I thank you. And I really want to say it's so amazing to get to meet all of you virtually. And I feel so lucky to get to share the exhibition with you and to meet with you. And, on a personal note, I know that I'm the last generation that gets to know Holocaust survivors personally. And I really see it as such an honor and a calling that I get to do this work and that I get to meet and work with people like all of you. So thank you so much for all being here and for sharing your stories as part of the Speakers Bureau. It's really, really, really remarkable. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And this will be recorded?
This was recorded, so we
Yes.
can send it out afterwards. Yep, absolutely. And to kind of go off of Mr. Forley's question, there was another Zoom recording that Becky did with another scholar on the team who did the curatorial work. So I'm happy to send that as well, because I'm sure it has, other types of information too. So I just
Yes.
want to echo Becky's words, and I will be in touch with all of you in the coming weeks. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for everything that you all do for the museum.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Bye.
the
Happy
program.
Thanks a
Hanukkah.
lot. Happy
Chag
Hanukkah.
Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Happy
Bye.
New Year.
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
Have a great day,
holidays,
everyone.
Happy
Take
New
care.
Year.
Bye.